Welcome to part 2 of my exploration into what created Kylo Ren, as well as covering his journey back to the light. Now that we have gone over the creation of Kylo Ren, I want to take a look at the events which pushed him back into his original identity, finally choosing to accept his true self as Ben Solo. And while a lot of things I say may seem obvious, I think it's important to paint a clear picture as to why these events led to the reemergence of Ben Solo. So let us begin. And we will start off with the Age of Resistance Snoke comic, since I think it sets a great foundation about what I will be discussing throughout this video. If you have never read that specific comic, I posted a link to the review in my description, so check that out first and then come back here. Within this story, Kylo Ren enters the dark side cave in Dagobah, and inside he is faced with a vision of Luke Skywalker, and he destroys this vision as Snoke stokes Kylo's hatred for him. But then Han and Leia appear, and they appear to Ben reaching out towards their lost son, asking him to stop, and that he is loved, telling him that he is Ben Solo. And rather than cut down the apparitions of his parents, he lashes out at a root of a tree that's inside. He's unable to sever the connection Snoke wants him to kill, and before Snoke can see Kylo's progress in this cave, Kylo destroys it entirely. This gives us a very good reason for Snoke's disgust with Kylo in The Last Jedi's first act. Even though this comic came out well after the previous two film entries, I thought it would be good to begin with this story based on the fact that regardless of what Kylo Ren feels towards Luke, when it comes to his parents, he is basically unable to act. And as we will discuss, even when he does take action, it further rips him apart because of the primary issue that Kylo Ren is facing internally. He believes that he is unloved. And now, I sort of look at that cave as giving Kylo a glimpse of what he most desires. And that's the feeling or belief that he was loved by the people who created him, Han and Leia. That might sound trivial, but a great many dark deeds have their root in self-loathing or low self-esteem based on the absence or perceived absence of love. So with that foundation, we move into the intro of The Force Awakens when Kylo Ren is interrogating Lor San Tekka about the star map. Kylo Ren uses his mask in order to maintain the illusion of control and fear. But that only works if the person on the other end doesn't know who you are. And in Kylo Ren's case, Tekka knows who he is intimately. And Tekka also makes sure that Kylo knows that he knows. Knowing the full picture regarding Ben Solo's choice to become Kylo Ren, I'd say that being reminded of the very thing you were hoping to escape from was actually more intense for Kylo Ren than the faceless mask could let on.
Look how old you've become.
Something far worse has happened to you.
He might appear cool, calm, and collected, but his body language is tight, making me think that he's holding his tension at bay. Now, for me, Tekka was truly the first person to force Kylo Ren to face the reality of his situation. And the reason I love that fact is that this happens within the first 10 minutes of the sequel trilogy. Tekka reminds Kylo Ren that he didn't rise from the dark side, and that whether or not Kylo thinks he's this agent of evil, he can't deny the truth that is his family. While Kylo Ren does eventually kill Tekka, considering his connection to the Sith invader, his action wasn't really a calculated move, more than it was just an impulsive reaction. Kylo Ren lashed out. And to slide back into the Snoke comic, Snoke tells Kylo that powerless men lash out in anger, and that it's better to harness that anger into power. But, like I also said, Kylo sort of fails Snoke's training. Within the novelization of The Force Awakens, Tekka even tells Kylo Ren that he doesn't belong to them being the First Order. And it says Tekka was speaking truth to the lie that stood before him, that turning away from heritage is the true tragedy of Kylo Ren. So why is all of this important? Well, it sets up our main villain with an immediate internal issue. We learn through this exchange that the very reminder of who Kylo Ren truly is, and who he used to be, and where he is from, causes extreme distress and rage. And this theme continues throughout the entirety of the trilogy. When Kylo Ren is torn down by Supreme Leader Snoke in the beginning of The Last Jedi, it's not solely because Rey beat him. It's because Snoke finally understands that Kylo Ren actually failed to sever the connection to his family on Dagobah.
You have too much of your father's heart in you.
Ben Solo continues to linger inside of Kylo Ren. But before we move into Last Jedi territory, there is that one significant event that truly begins the path back to the light in a big way: Kylo murdering his father. This is a scene I've talked about so often on this channel because of how integral it is to understanding Kylo Ren's path back to the light. Kylo is legitimately considering that maybe he can leave all of this behind when he first encounters his father. And reminder, this is maybe a few days after his meeting with Tekka, but in Kylo Ren's mind, it's also too late. And the truth that he believes is that the only way that he is going to end the pain that he's feeling inside all the time is to follow through with Snoke's teachings and to kill his past. Unfortunately for Snoke on the dark side, the second Kylo Ren impales his father with a killing blow, he instantly regrets it. He is horrified by it, and he's in shock. And on top of that, Han ends up gently caressing Kylo's face, still loving him and forgiving him regardless of this deed. Everything falls apart for Kylo Ren from here on out until the end of the film. He gets severely wounded, needing to use the Force to keep himself completely together. He loses to Rey in combat and almost dies in the process. For the remainder of the trilogy, this very act of killing his father just haunts Kylo Ren. Now, regarding The Last Jedi, the next moment we see Ben emerging is after he was scolded by Supreme Leader Snoke for his failure with Han Solo and Rey. Kylo decides to again lash out in anger, jumping into an assault on the Resistance. And while Kylo Ren seems cool, calm, and collected, once he senses the presence of his mother, he becomes distracted. The plan was to destroy the Bridge of the Radis. However, the last time Kylo Ren literally killed his past, it severely affected him negatively. So he takes his hands off the trigger knowing that he can't do it. And that's because he could sense Leia's worry for him, and that she wanted him to come home. Unfortunately, his wingmen do the deed, which leaves Kylo Ren stunned. He even thinks that had he not been shocked by what he felt, he could have stopped the bolts from hitting the bridge. That's not exactly the thinking of a person of pure evil. Just like in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, every time Ben does a dark deed, it seems to also cause a moment of despair and regret. Now, beyond that example, I think that Rey is the catalyst for most of Kylo Ren's pushes towards the light in The Last Jedi, and the reason being is that since they are both forced to interact due to their bond, they eventually come to find out that they are not that different. Beyond how magical that hut scene is with the idea of them reaching out, touching their hands together through space and time, it also shows us the first time Kylo lets his guard down, exposing his hand and embracing Rey's hand. And I think it's arguable that Kylo showing his face to Rey in The Force Awakens is also a time when he lets his guard down. However, I feel kind of like that was more for the shock value of how normal he was, something for the audience and Rey to react to. And throughout the movie, Rey eventually refers to Kylo as Ben, and Kylo does nothing to correct her. Even though Kylo still chooses to stick with the First Order, Rey had affected Kylo in a way that he never expected. And the reason he even ends up attacking Crate is primarily based on the fact that he feels rejected by Rey, thinking that she left him for dead after his offer to join him. And this leads to Kylo's final confrontation with Luke. Circling back to the Snoke comic, Kylo Ren straight up murders his uncle in the cave vision. That's the very thing that he wished he had accomplished the night of the temple destruction. And in a sense, Luke gives Kylo Ren this opportunity. I've always looked at this duel as Luke letting his nephew get out some much needed aggression on him, some much needed rage, on top of the fact that he's protecting the Resistance, letting them escape. And it also served as a good lesson. Kylo is really just kind of fighting himself out there, since Luke is just an illusion. And since Luke Skywalker dies on his own terms rather than literally at the hands of his nephew, it makes Kylo's whole mission to destroy Luke, the Last Jedi, just disintegrate. Luke took away that possibility from Kylo Ren, making part of his anger completely displaced now, having no reason to exist. And I personally do believe that when Kylo Ren whimpers to Luke before he fades away, that was a brief glimpse of Ben Solo realizing what is going on.
See you around, kid.
Another person of his past is gone now, and he knows for sure that Luke is sorry about what he has done. Right before The Last Jedi ends, Kylo Ren also briefly picks up Han's dice, which were given to Leia by Luke, but they disappeared in his hands as well, being another illusion or an apparition created by Luke. The point of it was to remind Kylo of his heritage and where he comes from, and to remind him of who he is. So essentially, the first two films, which arguably take place over 2 weeks or so, have Kylo Ren being bombarded with his past in ways which caused him to either hesitate in action, second guess his place on the dark side, or regret his evil deeds after they've been committed. And sometimes it was all of those things all at once. At the end of The Last Jedi, although Kylo Ren was seemingly at the height of his power, it was still just a shell around Ben Solo. When we move into The Rise of Skywalker, we learn a bit more about Kylo Ren's perspective on himself. He thinks he can't go back to his family because of what he is, this monster. Even though Kylo killed Snoke, he still believes all the negative things Snoke told him regarding his family and how they felt about him, how Ben Solo was always second to the Republic or the Resistance. And this comes across very clearly when Kylo is trying to win Rey to his side in the remnants of the Death Star. In reality, Kylo Ren just doesn't want to be alone, and wants Rey to accept his offer because he believes that she's just like him. And in the duel that occurs after this meeting in the film, the final attempt to reach Ben Solo occurs, and while it's pretty straightforward and simple, it's also kind of fascinating to me because of how it all unfolds. Leia uses all of her remaining life force to reach out to Ben, to let him know that he is forgiven and still loved even now, and that she's never lost hope that he would return to the light. It completely freezes Kylo Ren in his tracks because there's no deception here, it's only truth. And immediately as this occurs, Rey stabs Kylo Ren, fatally wounding him. However, Rey then heals him, and he literally cannot understand why she would heal him after all he had put her through. The movie itself doesn't dive deeply into the mindset of Ben in these moments, but the novel makes it clear that Leia's reaching out to him with everything she had and Rey's healing were enough to finally eradicate the darkness inside of him. The foundation of Kylo Ren was based on a lie, and that lie had evaporated. And this again brings us back to the Snoke comic from earlier. Kylo's desire was to be loved by his parents, and Ben Solo's ultimate desire was always to be who he truly is. And the tragedy is that now that he is starting to see things clearly, Ben Solo was his true self this whole time. It was the manipulation of the voices in his head and his own rage against Luke that kept him on the dark path. But through having to literally face everyone in his past throughout this trilogy, Kylo Ren finally puts to rest his self-loathing and hatred. And to close out this video, although the scene with Han was just a memory, its reason for existing is really profound. It's basically Ben Solo going through the memory of his final moments with Han and choosing the right thing this time, now that he knows the full truth. In the book, it states that Rey was always right. Kylo Ren never shook the memory of Han's caress on his face from the moment when he killed him, and it made him fully realize that Han Solo has always believed in him, that Leia believed in him, Rey has believed in him, and that it was him that was fighting against the light this entire time. In the end, what brought back Ben Solo was love and the hope that his family had in him, even Chewie, which was a small section of the novelization. Although the reasons Ben Solo had for becoming Kylo Ren were not based in evil, and from his point of view, at the time, perfectly reasonable, Kylo Ren was nothing but a careful curation of events that were twisted by Snoke and Palpatine. It's like that old saying that if you hear something long enough, you begin to believe it, and Kylo Ren Ben Solo sums up that saying perfectly. Now, do I think Kylo Ren's journey back to being Ben Solo could have been clearer? Of course. I think the books handled him much better, but then again, it's easier to dive deeper into a character in written form. But with that said, I did have a video theorizing how Kylo Ren would turn back to the light after seeing The Last Jedi, and it basically transpired exactly how I thought it would. So I think depending on if you liked The Last Jedi or not, or if you were looking at subtle cues in the films like I do, this was either probably completely random to you, or you saw it coming 100 miles away. I think it should have definitely been a bit clearer in regards to Kylo's main issues regarding his parents, more so than just Luke, but I do think it's easy to assume that being sent away, then almost killed by the person you were sent to, is enough for the audience to surmise that, oh, he's mad at his parents because they indirectly almost caused his death. But then on the flip side of this, that might be a little bit too much to ask from the audience these days. So hopefully now that I've walked through all the events I think were significant to the return of Ben Solo, you have a better idea of his whole story. For me, Kylo Ren, Ben Solo is the sequel trilogy. And if I had it my way, rather than primarily focus on a Jedi to be, I would have made Kylo Ren the main character entirely. I love Rey, but I find the story of Kylo Ren far more interesting. May the Force be with you. AT-AT is signing off.